Nibbler Away Dharma Talks.
Talk 9, 9th of September 2012. Right Mindfulness. Professor Geoffrey Hunt talks about mindfulness and judgment.
Today's talk is about mindfulness in respect of making judgments and what we mean by judgmentalism, etc. In the Western world, we have a moral framework in which we tend to divide everything into two. On the one hand, we have good. On the other hand, we have evil. On the one hand, we have right. On the other hand, we have wrong. And we do this habitually. It's part of our way of thinking of things. This is not really the Buddha's way of thinking of things at all, and it's not actually a very Eastern way of thinking of things. So we have quite a lot to contend with in the Western world if we really want to take up this practice in the hope that it will bring us compassion and peace. We have to work against some of our common sense assumptions. The Buddha would prefer to use words like helpful and unhelpful, or skillful and unskillful, or ignorant and wise, as opposed to good and evil. When we speak about mindfulness, this is really the first place to start when thinking about this polarization. Because when we are being mindful, we are paying close, continuing attention to some aspect of our actual, ongoing experience. So if you remember last week, we spoke about right concentration and how when we're following the breath closely and continuously, when you've expelled the air, you have a moment, a second or two, when nothing seems to be happening. And you're just kind of suspended in space. That is a moment in which you feel like nothing's happening. There needn't be any thought or any feeling about anything. It's just a moment of peace. And it is that moment that we want to expand and bring more of it into our lives. So it becomes a kind of a refuge where you can go when things are troublesome. Just a place of peace. The peace, in other words, is within you or comes from within you, whatever is going on outside. But of course, peace within yourself does not necessarily come naturally. One has to work for it, one has to find it, and one has to sustain it. And this is what the Buddha's path is about. Now, we can't do that if we are being judgmental or if we are passing judgments. So when we have exhaled, we're in a moment of peace, a thought may come into the mind. And that may be judgmental or a feeling. So, for example, it may be a feeling of pain or discomfort. That's bad, isn't it? So we want to drive that out. The Buddha takes a different tack. He says whatever arises, just observe it and let it go. Try to let go of making judgments, even about one's own experience. So that is why we use the word bare experience, B-A-R-E, bare experience, in mindfulness. That is, it's experience, if you like, without anything added. So if I have a pain in my knee, that could easily trigger off a whole set of feelings and thoughts about that, even resentment or anger about it, and pity for oneself, and so on. Or even jealousy of others who don't have a pain in their knee. A whole narrative could develop from that. Whereas instead of rejecting it or fighting it with medication or whatever, why not just accept it? Now, this is not to say that we should never use medication, because there are situations in which that is the right thing to do. And even in the Buddha's time, and almost certainly the Buddha himself would use herbal medications under some circumstances. It's a question of not reaching for the bottle as the first thing, but instead saying, okay, there's a pain there. Can I just watch it? And can I let it go? Or can I just say, well, it's there, but it doesn't mean anything much to me? That takes quite a bit of mental training, and it doesn't come at once, and it also depends on a lot of external factors, and it also depends, of course, on the severity of the pain. If one used half of the medication one was prescribed to ameliorate the pain, and then use meditation techniques to deal with the other half, that would be a step forward, because every medication known to man has some side effect, sometimes long-term side effect, or synergistic effects with other medications or foods that one is eating. So let's come back to this issue of judgment now and think about what it means not to judge one's experience. Is that possible? It is possible, but it isn't particularly easy at first. But we've got to understand what we mean by judgment. By judgment, we mean believing or thinking or experiencing something as either good or as bad. Can we somehow let go of that distinction, at least temporarily? Or can we soften that distinction so that we don't appeal to it like a reflex or a knee-jerk reaction? The first thing to understand is the Buddha is not saying don't be judgmental in the sense in which we say that in the Western world. You've all heard that expression, haven't you? Don't be judgmental. Not quite what the Buddha means. When we say don't be judgmental, what we're saying is don't pass a negative judgment on usually somebody else. That's not what the Buddha is saying. Well, he is saying that, but he's saying a lot more than that. Surprisingly, he's saying don't pass a positive judgment as well. Don't pass a negative or a positive judgment, especially during meditation. Just take things as they come along. This connects with the previous teaching, if you remember, some weeks ago, on praise and blame. It's easy enough, isn't it, to say, don't blame others. We know that from our Christian background, even if we're not Christians any longer. It's deep in our culture. But what about not praising others? That doesn't seem to make sense to us, does it? I was closing the windows, and Paul said to me, "Well done, Jeff, you did a good job there." Right? He was praising me. That's not something that we shouldn't ordinarily do, but the Buddha is saying be aware of what you're doing when you're praising or blaming. Because what is going on? Could that be inflating my ego, for example? I think in such cases, perhaps it is the action that one should aim at, not the person. So I don't think in this case Paul was saying what a wonderful person I was. He was saying that the job or the action was helpful or skillful. But when we say that a person is good or a person is evil, we are actually sticking a label on a property that they have in themselves. I'm saying that goodness or evil is a property of this person, which leads to a whole different philosophy, if you like, about how we bring up our children, our education system, our penal system, our political system. For example, punishment is quite central to our system because we assume that certain people are evil and they choose to do evil and they should be punished for it. It's a retributive system. I don't think that's very civilized at all. It's much more civilized to see people sometimes, as we all do, behaving out of ignorance. And if someone is ignorant, then of course that leaves space for re-education, rehabilitation, however far that can go. There is no progress in saying this person is bad, therefore I am going to be bad to you. Then we've got two bad people and not one. The executioner is killing somebody because that person killed somebody. So now we've got two deaths and not one. No progress in understanding whatsoever. We just think that we can eliminate evil or eliminate bad. It cannot be eliminated because it doesn't exist. We need to look into the roots of our own actions. So we need to shift to seeing things as a matter of ignorance or wisdom, as a matter of skillfulness or unskillfulness, helpfulness or unhelpfulness. Focus on the actions and activities of human beings. Now it's the same when we are being mindful of our experience. When a distraction comes in, I might feel irritated or want to reject that as something bad. It's bad, isn't it, to hear a door slamming outside? Why is that person so thoughtless? Why can't they close the door quietly? Put it down to unskillfulness, unhelpfulness, ignorance, whatever, inattention. Inattention is another big thing. We all do a lot of harm just through sheer inattention. That's very different from being bad or being evil, because we can all expand our attention. On the other hand, it is within my power to hear that door slamming, and I don't really hear it as someone being irresponsible. All I hear is just, well, it's just something arising. It's just there. So I approach it in a sort of a neutral way. So the expression, don't be judgmental, is not what the Buddha is teaching. Or if you like, let's say that is what he's teaching, but what he means by it is no judgment at all, whether positive or negative. At least in one's meditation to start with, but then you expand it to having a different moral framework, a different view of human behavior, including my own. Because of course, if my moral framework is one of good and evil, then where does that put me? Where does that put me? When I get something wrong, and I label myself as being a bad person, or evil, or having an evil tendency, I feel guilt, I feel a failure, I feel bad. There's no progress in that. I'm sinking because of the way I think about what I'm doing. So I've done something unfortunate, and now I'm doubling it by beating myself up over it. Whereas what I could do is look into it, if and when it happens, study it, observe it, and understand it. And in understanding it, I will know when it's arising. And I can ameliorate its arising, or even let go of its arising entirely, and shift my attention to something more productive, more fruitful, more helpful to others, rather than spending my time beating myself up. See, this conception of things does a lot of harm, not only to others, but it's doing a lot of harm to myself. What I'd really like to be, and what I can be, is more skillful, more wise, more helpful, more attentive, more mindful. I can be those things if I work on it. So that's where my effort should be going. We need to let go of this polarizing or dualizing. By dualizing, I mean splitting things into two, good, bad. Dualizing framework. We need to let go of that dualizing, polarizing framework and think instead of skillfulness. Even someone that does some pretty harmful things, harmful to others in life, what's really going on with that person? And how does it help to understand them if we say that they're evil? All we've done is stick a label on them. Stick a label on them, then we can put them away. Whereas actually, every human being is struggling with life and trying to find some happiness in life, or find a space in life. And some do it skillfully, and some do it very unskillfully. And in hurting others, they end up hurting themselves as well. It's just unskillfulness. I mean, what an enlightening way it is to see that each of us has a degree of skillfulness or unskillfulness in everything that we do. Just try to see it that way. Okay, if we come back to the mindfulness then, when we are meditating and, you have that pain in the knee, or the door slams, or a thought comes into your head, one thing we can try to do is let go of any judgment that may be attached to it. One way of looking at this is to think in terms of neutrality, perhaps a helpful way. Sugar is sweet, salt is salty, so we've dualized, but some things are neutral, aren't they? What about water? What is the taste of water? Something that is rotting in the fridge. You wouldn't want to put that in your mouth. We would reject that. It's nasty. It's not nasty to all creatures. The nastiest thing you can think of is eaten by something. Vultures, maggots. There are beetles that eat dog turds. They are delicious to those creatures. If you think of water, now has water got a taste? No. I mean, if it's pure water, then it has no taste. You might say it's neutral. Put water in your mouth. If it's pure water, you could sense the water, enjoy the water if you like, but it's very difficult to say that it's either good or bad. I mean, it's good if you're very thirsty, but it's bad if it's too hot or too cold, or if you've just had enough of it. Too much water can actually kill you. So what is good and bad? Is good and bad in the object itself, or is it something that I add to it? See, if I say a person is an evil person, I'm suggesting that the evil is in that person. And I forget that I am the one judging that person as evil. So the question is whether things in themselves, if you like, carry around properties of good, bad, right, wrong, and so on. Now, in the Western world, we are very inclined to think that is the case. And it's very difficult to shake it off. And it's one reason why the Buddha Dharma progresses extremely slowly in the West. We've got an alternative framework. And here comes this other framework that's clashing with it, and we'd rather just stick with what we're sure of, even though it's just possible that this other framework may make a lot more sense if only we would start shifting over to it, or at least listen to it and then draw our own conclusions as to whether in some ways it would lead to more peace, harmony, compassion, wisdom than the framework that we've already got. It's very difficult to let go of the set of assumptions that one has always worked with. Let's try to think in terms of things just arising. When we're meditating, things just arise. The mobile phone goes off. It would be very tempting with our little Western framework to think, how irritating. Or, why doesn't that person switch their mobile phone off? See, we're straight into judging straight away. Whereas if we're meditating, we should just say, okay, so hearing something, or, sound arising, move on. Come back to watching the breath. No part of the instruction said to judge anything. There is no instruction in meditation that says to judge something. It just says, watch it, observe it, and let it go. That's what it says. So that's what we should try to do. It isn't easy at first, but we can do it if we persevere. Now, what about the Buddha himself? Did the Buddha pass judgments on things? Well, it might be argued that he did. After all, doesn't he give us the 5 precepts, which is one of my earlier talks? In the 5 precepts, it says, do not harm things, do not harm human beings or other sentient beings. Do not tell lies, do not take what is not given to you. Do not take intoxicating substances. And do not enter into sexual or intimate relations in an exploitative, manipulative manner or deceptive manner. That sounds like judgment, doesn't it? Well, it's easy to think with our Western framework that the Buddha is giving us another 10 commandments. He's not. He is giving us an instruction of skillfulness in getting through life and in moving towards wisdom, compassion, and peace. In other words, he's saying, if you go around telling a lot of lies and manipulating things, you will not be happy. You will not have wisdom. You will not have compassion. You will not have understanding. And you will not have peace. So you see, it's a means to an end. He's not saying, don't tell lies, otherwise you'll be struck by a thunderbolt from God. There is no happiness in telling lies. There is no wisdom in telling lies. Once his son, Rahula, told him a lie, or a small lie, and it was an opportunity for the Buddha to give a little talk to his son along the lines that I'm saying now. It's not as, if you tell a lie again, I'm going to whack you across the head, or if you tell a lie, you're going to go to hell. It's basically, if you tell a lie, you're moving into foolishness and you're harming yourself. And there's a whole sutra in the Tipitaka, classical teachings, which is about this talk to Rahula. So if the Buddha is making judgments, it's not quite in the way that we might think. Really, he's teaching us skillfulness in life, that we ourselves may be more peaceful and wiser.
New Buddha Way approaches meditation as a way of life, letting go of East and West, past and future, and starting afresh here and now. To find out more, visit www.newbuddhaway.org.